Hi class, my name is Rachel Cummings, and today we're going to be discussing Chapter 13 entitled Contemporary Views of Leadership in Organizations. This chapter focuses on emerging leadership issues. If you'll go to slide 1, you'll see the slide entitled Contemporary Situational Theories. These are the new theories being examined. The first one is entitled the Leader-Member Exchange Model. Now, I know at my job, I have been in a subordinate position for several years now, and I've gone through about 4 different supervisors. Now, within these supervisors, sometimes I feel like I'm getting a lot more responsibility, they come to me a lot more, I find out about upcoming events sooner than other people, and then other times, I feel like I'm the last one to know. This is because sometimes you're part of an in-group, and sometimes you're part of an out-group. When you're the in-group, it means that you receive special duties that require more responsibility, and you also receive special privileges. This is because when you first meet your new supervisor, they're automatically determining whether you're in the in-group or the out-group based on their opinions of you. If you have a strong relationship with them and they like you, you're probably going to be in their in-group, versus if you don't really hit it off that first time you meet, you might be part of the out-group. The other situational theory that you'll see on the slide is the Hershey and Blanchard model. Now, within this model, it is based on the notion that appropriate leader behavior depends on the readiness of the leader's followers. Now, I know when I was first hired at my job, we went through something called phases, and it was phases 1 through 3, and you had to pass a certain amount of goals to go through each phase. Now, in phase 1, you'd probably be part of the telling style, because your leader's having to tell you everything because you're new and you don't know anything yet. And as you get better at it, then maybe you'll go into a selling style when you're offering direction accompanied by explanation. And then again, as you continue, maybe it'll be the participating style, which allows the followers to share in the decision making. And then finally, it's the delegating style, which allows the workers to work independently. So by the time you reach phase 3 and you move on and you're on your own, at this point you should be in the delegating style, which means you can take responsibility for your job, you don't have to be constantly monitored by your supervisor, so you move through these stages. Now if you went through all 3 of your phases and you get out and your supervisor is still treating you like you're in the telling or selling style, then your work performance is probably going to be low because clearly they don't have very high expectations of you. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see it entitled Leadership Through the Eyes of Followers. And there's 3 different types: transformational leadership, charismatic leadership, and attributions of leadership. The first one, transformational leadership, is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you need to transform something, and it's understanding the distinction between leading for change and leading for stability. So if you get a new CEO of a business, and they see there's a lot of changes that need to be made, they're probably going to fall into the transformational leadership. I know with me, as I've gone through new supervisors, every supervisor wants to do something different. And sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's for the worse. And with transformational leadership, if they come in and see that this group of people, they don't work together, they might decide that there need to be some changes made and need to fall into transformational leadership. But that doesn't mean that it can't change so that they can fall into a different type of leadership as things progress. The next one is entitled Charismatic Leadership, and in your book you would see a picture of JFK. And this is because he was someone who was considered that he had a lot of charisma. That's one of the reasons he became president. He had good looks and he had this natural charisma. So charisma is a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires support and acceptance. And it's a type of influence that's based on the leader's personal charisma. And people are just going to naturally have charisma or they aren't. And that's why sometimes people fail. I know with me, if you go from a supervisor who's full of charisma and spirit and they really understand the group, and the next leader comes in and they lack in that charisma, there's just something missing and the group doesn't do as well. And the book explains that, oftentimes when there's charismatic leaders and then a new leader comes in and they don't have that charisma, a lot of times they don't last very long in that job because people miss that. The last one you'll see is the attribution perspective. That concludes that when behaviors are observed in a context associated with leadership, others may attribute varying levels of leadership, ability, or power to the person displaying those behaviors. Now, I work as a 911 operator, and very often we'll get people that'll call and they'll be screaming on the phone, and they'll be so upset for whatever situation's going on. And this could go on and on and on until the officer gets there. Every once in a while, things will calm down because I can hear someone in the background taking charge. It's all of a sudden that voice of reason. And you can hear somebody being, okay, you talk to the 911 operator. I'll apply pressure to the wound. You do this. I'll do that. And everybody starts to calm down because someone has taken charge and people are drawn to this person. They feel like they can trust this person. Here's a leader. Versus when everybody's just screaming, no one's willing to take charge, and the scene is absolute chaos. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see it entitled Alternatives to Leadership. And there are two types, leadership substitutes and leadership neutralizers. Now, a leadership substitutes are individual task and organizational characteristics that tend to outweigh the leader's ability to affect subordinate satisfaction and performance. Now, again, going back to my job as a 911 operator, when a call comes in, we're not going to wait to get our supervisor's approval on what to do with it. There's just not enough time. It's my responsibility to do what needs to be done with the call. It's a substitute for leadership because I'm aware of what needs to be done, and I can do it on my own without having to have my supervisor over my shoulder telling me what to do. Now, the leadership neutralizer, these are factors that render ineffective a leader's attempt to engage in various leadership behaviors. The next slide displays a list of things that need to be looked at as we continue to research leadership in the future. The first thing is leaders as coaches. Leaders are continuing to serve more as a coach role instead of an overseer role, which means that instead of them constantly being over you, telling you what to do, they're now more there just to motivate you and to mentor you when needed, and then to sit back and let you do your job. Another thing that needs to be examined is gender within leadership. Most of the research that has been done has been males in CEO and high positions of power, but more and more women are starting to become into these high positions of power. It needs to be looked at if anything changes with women versus men. Another is the cross-cultural leadership. Now in this one it displays how African Americans and Hispanics and members of other ethnic groups are achieving high leadership positions. Because most of the research when it was done, the majority of CEOs were white males. So as more cultures come into it, it needs to be examined how this changes things in our views on leadership. Religion can also play an important part in leadership. It gives the example of that if a Jewish or a Christian leader led a group of Islamists, then the group would face a variety of complex issues. And it'd be the same thing with Liberty University as a Christian university. We wouldn't want someone who was not a Christian running the school because they're probably going to stick in their own values in there, and that's not something that the school stands for. On the next slide, you'll see three emerging issues in leadership: strategic leadership, ethical leadership, and virtual leadership. Strategic leadership focuses on the organization and its environment and how it can lead to change. Strategic leadership focuses on the leader's ability to think and function strategically, and it's important for them to understand the organization's history, its culture, its strength, and its weaknesses. The next one is ethical leadership, and this focuses on the leader's ethical conduct, as well as the leader enforcing it on its subordinates. Now, I know in my job this is huge. As a 911 operator, it's part of the police department, and one of the biggest things is ethics. In order to get hired, I had to take a polygraph, and so obviously they're looking for any time that you're going to lie about anything, and as you continue in the job, if they ever discover that you lied, you get fired. And this is a huge issue with things like Facebook. People calling in sick to work, and then they post a picture of themselves at a party, and you'll get fired because that ethical conduct was challenged. Lastly is virtual leadership. Now, as more and more supervisors are not meeting with their subordinates face-to-face, they're having to send email, they're talking over the phone, they're Skyping. Because of this, there needs to be more research done in how this affects the relationship between those leaders and those subordinates when there is that lack of face-to-face. I know with my supervisor, their main means of communication is email. To find out about anything that's going on, you have to check your email, and if you don't, there's a lot of times I don't find things out because I forgot to check my email that day, which can be difficult because there's no guarantee every employee is going to find out at the same time versus if you had that face-to-face and you know for certain that that employee did receive the information. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see the discussion question. Now what I'd like you to do is to choose a leader that falls into one of the 3 primary approaches to leadership. So whether that's transformational, charismatic, or attributions of leadership. Now, I prefer that it's someone that you personally know, whether it's your supervisor, but you can choose anybody in a leadership position. After you choose this person and decide which category they fit into, then I want you to discuss the pros and cons of having a leader who fits into one of those categories. Thank you so much for listening. Bye, class.